Most millionaires look rich. Nice houses, nice cars, expensive vacations. But one of the most fascinating millionaire stories in America starts with a man who cleaned floors at a department store. His name was Ronald Read, and when he died, people discovered he had quietly built an $8 million investment portfolio. Ronald Read lived in a small town in Vermont. If you had walked past him on the street, you probably wouldn't have looked twice. He wore flannel shirts. He drove old cars. Sometimes he clipped coupons at the local diner. For years, he worked at a gas station. Later, he got a job as a janitor at JCPenney. He swept floors, cleaned bathrooms, locked up the store at night. It was the kind of job most people barely notice. And for decades, that's exactly what happened. Nobody noticed Ronald Read. But Ronald had a routine. After work, he would sometimes sit down and read the newspaper, the business pages. He liked reading about companies, factories, pharmaceutical firms, consumer brands, companies like Procter & Gamble, Johnson & Johnson. When he had extra money, he would buy shares. Not huge amounts, just what he could afford. And then he would do something unusual. Nothing. He would hold the stocks, year after year, sometimes for decades. Ronald wasn't trying to become famous for investing. In fact, very few people even knew he owned stocks. He didn't talk about it much. Friends later said he would occasionally mention a company he liked, but it wasn't something he bragged about. Investing for him wasn't a hobby. It was just something he quietly did over time. He would buy shares when he could afford them, sometimes only a few at a time. Then he would file the paperwork away and go back to his life. Work, dinner, sleep, repeat. Nothing about it looked dramatic, but that's exactly how compounding works. It doesn't look like much while it's happening. While other people were upgrading cars and houses, Ronald kept living the same way. He didn't chase the image of wealth. He quietly avoided spending money he didn't need to spend, which meant something important started happening over time. Money began accumulating, slowly at first, almost invisibly. Dividends were reinvested, stock prices rose, years passed, then decades. When Ronald Read died in 2014, his small town in Vermont was stunned, because the quiet janitor who swept floors at the department store had accumulated about $8 million. He left millions to a local hospital, millions to the town library. People who had known him for years couldn't believe it. How does someone with a modest job build that kind of wealth? Here's the strange thing. There was no secret. Ronald didn't invent a startup. He didn't trade stocks every day. He simply invested in companies and gave those investments time to grow. Historically, the stock market has produced long-term returns around 7 to 10% per year. That doesn't sound dramatic, but over 30 or 40 years, something powerful happens. Compounding begins to take over, money earns returns, then those returns earn returns. And slowly, quietly, wealth begins to build. One of the most interesting parts of Ronald Read's portfolio is what he didn't do. He didn't constantly buy and sell. He didn't chase hot stocks. He didn't try to predict what the market would do next month. Instead, he focused on companies he believed would still exist years from now. Household brands, companies that sold everyday products, the kind of businesses people rely on regardless of what the economy is doing. And once he bought them, he held them for years, sometimes for decades. That patience turned out to be incredibly powerful, because the longer an investment compounds, the more dramatic the growth becomes. At first, the progress is almost invisible, but over long periods of time, the curve starts to bend upward, and eventually the growth becomes difficult to ignore. But there's another piece of the story people often overlook. Ronald Read always had money left to invest. And that wasn't because he earned a huge salary. It's because he understood something simple. He knew what his life actually cost. Most people don't. If you ask someone what they spent last month, they'd probably guess. Subscriptions, convenience spending, random purchases that add up. Most people never see the full picture. That's actually why I created something called the 30-Day Spending Reset. It's a simple exercise where you track every dollar you spend for 30 days, not to judge yourself, just to see the numbers clearly. Because once people see where their money is actually going, something interesting happens. They usually discover there's more room to invest than they thought. If you want to try it, the 30-day spending reset is linked below. Ronald Read never called it a spending reset, but in a way, he lived that way his entire life. He spent carefully, invested consistently, and then he waited. Wealth stories in the news are usually dramatic. Startups, crypto fortunes, sudden success. But many fortunes are built the way Ronald Read built his. Quietly, slowly, without anyone noticing. The strange truth is that building wealth often looks boring, until one day it doesn't. For most of his life, Ronald Read looked like an ordinary janitor, and in many ways he was. But behind that ordinary life was something powerful: patience, discipline, and decades of compounding. Which is why one of the most fascinating millionaire stories in America begins with a man sweeping floors at a department store and ends with an $8 million fortune. What do you think about Ronald Read's approach to money? Would you invest quietly for decades like he did, or would you do it differently? Share your thoughts in the comments. Be sure to like and subscribe for more videos on money, wealth, and financial psychology.